They say the bond between mates is sacred. They say it's the one thing in this world that cannot be broken. But what happens when the person designed to love you is the one who destroys you? Lydia stood on the side of a desolate highway, the freezing rain masking the tears streaming down her face. She had been rejected, humiliated, and thrown out like garbage by the man she thought was her destiny. She thought her life was over. She thought she was invisible. But she was wrong. In the darkness, the most powerful predator in the world was watching, and he wasn't looking for a mate, he was looking for a queen. This is the story of how a broken girl brought the Alpha King to his knees. The sound of the suitcase hitting the wet pavement was louder than the thunder rolling overhead. "And don't bother coming back for the rest of your trash, Lydia," Gavin spat, his voice fighting against the roar of the wind. "Chloe is moving in tomorrow. I don't want your scent lingering on the furniture." Lydia stood frozen on the porch steps, the cold rain instantly soaking through her thin cardigan. She looked at Gavin, her mate, the alpha of the Crescent Creek pack, the man the moon goddess had supposedly gifted to her. His face, usually handsome and charming, was twisted into a sneer of pure disgust. "Gavin, please," Lydia whispered, her voice cracking. "It's pouring. I have nowhere to go. My parents are gone. You know I have no savings. Just let me stay in the guest room until morning." Gavin laughed, a cruel, barking sound. He leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. Behind him, the warm, golden light of the house Lydia had spent 2 years decorating, cleaning, and turning into a home, seemed to mock her. "Guest room?" Gavin scoffed. "Omegas don't get guest rooms, Lydia. You were a mistake, a glitch in the mating bond. I need a Luna who can produce strong heirs, not a weak, wolfless Omega who can barely lift a crate of supplies." He stepped forward, his eyes flashing a dangerous amber. "I rejected you, Lydia. The bond is snapped. You are nothing to me. Now get off my property before I have the enforcers drag you to the border." The door slammed shut. The sound echoed in Lydia's chest, a physical blow that hurt more than the rejection itself. The click of the deadbolt was the final period at the end of her life sentence. She didn't scream. She didn't bang on the door. She knew Gavin. She knew that once his mind was made up, pleading only fueled his ego. Trembling, Lydia reached down and gripped the handle of her broken suitcase. One of the wheels was missing, snapped off when he threw it. She had to drag it, the plastic scraping loudly against the concrete driveway. She walked. She walked past the manicured lawns of the pack members who used to smile at her when she organized the harvest festivals. She walked past the pack house where she had cooked meals for 50 people without a single thank you. No one looked out their windows. No one came to help. To the Crescent Creek pack, an unmated Omega was less than a ghost. By the time she reached the edge of the town, near the old bus stop on Route 9, her hands were numb. The rain was relentless, freezing sleet that stung her skin. It was 11:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. The last bus had left an hour ago. Lydia collapsed onto the rusted metal bench. She pulled her knees to her chest, trying to preserve whatever body heat she had left. She was 22 years old, and she had exactly $40 in her pocket and a suitcase full of wet clothes. "Why?" she whispered to the empty, rain-slicked street. "What did I do wrong?" She buried her face in her hands, and finally the dam broke. She sobbed. She cried for the parents she lost in the rogue attack 3 years ago. She cried for the love she wasted on Gavin. She cried because she was cold, and she knew that if she fell asleep here, she might not wake up. She was so consumed by her grief that she didn't hear the low, powerful purr of an engine approaching. She didn't see the headlights cut through the darkness like twin blades. She only realized she wasn't alone when the rain suddenly stopped falling on her head. Lydia looked up. Standing over her, holding a massive black umbrella, was a man. He was towering, easily 6'5", wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Gavin's entire house. But it wasn't his clothes that made Lydia's breath hitch. It was his eyes. They were the color of storm clouds, swirling with a power so ancient and terrifying that her wolf, which had been dormant and silent for years, suddenly whimpered in submission. He didn't say a word. He just stared down at her, his expression unreadable, watching the tears mix with the rain on her cheeks. Lydia scrambled backward, pressing her spine against the cold metal of the bus stop enclosure. I don't have any money," she stammered, her teeth chattering violently. "Please, just leave me alone." The man didn't move. He didn't blink. The aura radiating off him was suffocating. It smelled of cedar, ozone, and fresh blood, the scent of an alpha, but stronger. Much stronger. This was the scent of a killer. "Who did this to you?" His voice was a low rumble, deep and vibrating through the pavement. It wasn't a question of curiosity. It was a demand for information. Lydia wiped her eyes, shivering. "It doesn't matter. Please, sir. I'm just waiting for a bus." "The bus isn't coming, Lydia," he said. Lydia froze. How do you know my name?" The man tilted his head slightly. The streetlights reflected off his sharp jawline and the faint scar running through his left eyebrow. He looked dangerous, like a weapon sheathed in silk. "I know the name of every wolf in this territory," he said calmly, "even the ones who have been discarded." He extended a hand. It was large, his fingers long and scarred. "Get up." "No," Lydia said, though her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know you." The man's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in impatience. "You are freezing. Your heart rate is dangerously slow. You are an omega with no pack protection, sitting on the border of the neutral lands. If I leave you here, rogues will find you within the hour, and they won't be as polite as I am." Lydia knew he was right. The neutral lands were lawless, but going with a strange, overpowered alpha was just as dangerous. "Why do you care?" she asked, clutching her wet cardigan tighter. The man stepped closer, crouching down so his face was level with hers. For the first time, she saw a flicker of something in his grey eyes. It wasn't pity. It was possessiveness. "Because," he whispered, his voice dropping an octave, "I have spent 5 years looking for a scent that calms the beast inside me. And I found it, sitting on a rusted bench in the middle of nowhere." He didn't wait for her permission. He reached out and effortlessly lifted her suitcase with one hand. With the other, he offered his palm again. "My name is Declan," he said. "Declan Moore." Lydia gasped. The air left her lungs. Declan Moore, the Alpha King. Everyone knew the stories. He was the ruler of the Northern Alliance, the wolf who ended the Great War. They said he was heartless. They said he executed alphas who disobeyed him without a second thought. They said he had no mate because the moon goddess feared giving anyone that much power over him. And he was standing at a bus stop in the rain, holding an umbrella over her. King Declan," Lydia stuttered, instinctively dipping her head to bare her neck, a sign of total submission. "None of that," he commanded softly. "Stand up, Lydia." Trembling, she placed her small, freezing hand in his warm, rough one. He pulled her up with a strength that was terrifyingly controlled. As soon as she was on her feet, the world spun. The exhaustion, the cold, and the shock were too much. Her knees buckled. She waited to hit the wet concrete, but she never did. Strong arms scooped her up before she could fall. She was pressed against a chest that felt like a wall of solid granite. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. He carried her toward the black sedan idling at the curb. A driver in a suit jumped out to open the rear door, bowing his head low. "To the estate, Alpha?" the driver asked, keeping his eyes averted. Declan settled Lydia onto the plush leather seats, which were already warm. He climbed in beside her, the heavy door thudding shut and sealing out the noise of the storm. "Yes," Declan said, his eyes never leaving Lydia's pale face. "And call the pack doctor. Tell him to be ready." Lydia leaned her head back, her vision blurring. The car smelled like him, cedar and power. For the first time in 10 years, her wolf didn't feel afraid. It felt safe. "Why?" she mumbled, her consciousness slipping away as the car accelerated smoothly. "I'm nobody." Declan reached over and brushed a strand of wet hair away from her cheek. His touch was electric. "Sleep, Lydia," he ordered. "You are far from nobody." Lydia woke up to the feeling of silk. She wasn't on a park bench. She wasn't on Gavin's lumpy guest mattress. She was sinking into a bed that felt like a cloud, covered in sheets that were softer than anything she had ever touched. She bolted upright, gasping. The room was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a sprawling estate of pine forests and mist-covered mountains. A fire crackled in a stone hearth across the room. "Easy," a voice said from the corner. Lydia snapped her head around. Declan was sitting in a leather armchair near the fire, reading a file. He had shed his suit jacket and tie. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the top, revealing a glimpse of a tattoo on his collarbone. He closed the file and stood up. The sheer size of him made the large room feel small. "Where am I?" Lydia asked, pulling the duvet up to her chin. She realized with a flush of shame that she wasn't wearing her wet clothes anymore. She was wearing a large, soft t-shirt that smelled like him. "You are in the royal estate," Declan said, walking toward the bed. "My home." Your shirt," she whispered. "Your clothes were ruined," he stated simply. "The maids burned them." "Burned them?" Lydia's eyes widened. "But that was everything I owned. You don't need them anymore." Declan stopped at the foot of the bed. His presence was intense, a physical weight in the air. "I had the doctor examine you while you slept. You are malnourished, Lydia. You have bruising on your wrists and signs of long-term stress. Your wolf is in a deep hibernation from trauma." Lydia looked down at her hands. "I'm an Omega. We aren't strong like you." "Being an Omega does not mean being weak," Declan growled softly, "and it certainly doesn't justify the way the Crescent Creek Pack treated you." Lydia flinched at the anger in his voice. "How do you know about them?" "I know everything," Declan said. He tossed the file he was holding onto the bed. It slid toward her. Lydia hesitantly picked it up. Inside were photos of Gavin, photos of her old house, financial records, and a report detailing Gavin's mate rejection filed with the council only hours ago. "He cited inability to produce heirs as the reason," Declan said, his voice dripping with disgust. "He didn't even wait 24 hours to move his mistress in." Lydia felt the tears welling up again. "Please don't. I can't talk about him." "We won't talk about him," Declan said. He moved to the side of the bed and sat down. The mattress dipped under his weight. He was close now. Too close. His grey eyes bore into hers, stripping away her defenses. He reached out and tilted her chin up. His fingers were rough, but his touch was agonizingly gentle. "Lydia, look at me." She forced herself to meet his gaze. "You have no pack," he said. "You have no family. You have no home." "I know," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. I'll leave. I'll go to the city and find a shelter. I won't burden you." Declan's thumb brushed the tear away. His pupils dilated, consuming the grey of his irises. "You aren't going anywhere." The command froze her in place. It wasn't an alpha command. It wasn't magic forcing her to obey. It was the sheer will of a man who never heard the word no. "What? What do you mean?" Declan leaned in, his face inches from hers. She could feel his warm breath on her lips. "I found you," he said, his voice dropping to a husky whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "I pulled you out of the rain. I brought you into my home. In the laws of the old world. That makes a claim." Lydia's heart hammered against her ribs. "A claim?" "I don't care that Gavin rejected you," Declan said. "I don't care that you're an Omega. I don't care that you think you're broken." He moved his hand to cup the back of her neck, his thumb resting on her pulse point. "You smell like rain and vanilla," he murmured, inhaling deeply. "And for the first time in 5 years, the noise in my head has stopped." He locked eyes with her, and the intensity stole her breath. "You are staying here, Lydia. You will eat my food. You will sleep in my bed. You will wear my mark if I decide to give it." "But why?" she breathed. Declan's expression darkened, possessive and terrifyingly beautiful. "Because," he whispered, "from now on you're mine." The first week at the royal estate passed in a blur of luxury that felt more like a fever dream than reality. Lydia waited for the other shoe to drop. She waited for Declan to demand she scrub the floors, or for him to grow bored and toss her back onto the street. But he didn't. Instead, he integrated her into his life with terrifying efficiency. He ate breakfast with her every morning, watching her with those intense grey eyes to ensure she cleared her plate. He brought her books from the library because he noticed she stared longingly at the spines. He even worked in the study with the door open, demanding she sit on the plush sofa nearby, simply because he liked knowing where she was. However, Lydia felt like a fraud. She was a discarded Omega, wearing silk in a castle built for predators. On the 7th day, the truth came crashing down. Lydia was sitting in the solarium, watching the rain lash against the glass, when Mrs. Gable, the stern but kind, elderly housekeeper, entered. "The doctor is here, Miss Lydia," Mrs. Gable said, wiping her hands on her apron. "The king is waiting for you in his office." Lydia's stomach dropped. This is it, she thought. The doctor found out I'm too weak. I'm defective. Declan is going to send me away. She walked to the office on shaky legs. When she opened the heavy oak doors, the atmosphere was suffocating. Declan stood behind his desk, looking out the window, his back tense. Dr. Orris, a sharp-featured man with glasses, sat holding a tablet, looking grim. "Sit down, Lydia," Declan said. He didn't turn around. His voice was tight, like a coiled spring. Lydia sat, gripping the arms of the chair. Is something wrong with me? I know I haven't shifted in years, but..." "There is nothing wrong with you," Dr. Aris interrupted gently. "But there is something very wrong with what was done to you." Declan turned around then. The look on his face made Lydia gasp. He was furious, a cold, lethal rage that darkened the room. But the rage wasn't directed at her. "Tell her," Declan commanded the doctor. Dr. Aris tapped his tablet. "Lydia, when we ran your blood panels to check for malnutrition, we found traces of a compound called aconitum lycoctonum. Do you know what that is?" Lydia shook her head. "No. It's a rare derivative of wolfsbane," the doctor explained. "It doesn't kill you. Not immediately. But in small, consistent doses over years, it acts as a suppressant. It weakens the muscles, causes chronic fatigue, And most importantly, it forces the wolf spirit into a coma. It prevents shifting. Lydia stared at him, her mind unable to process the words. I don't understand. How would that be in my system? Declan walked around the desk, moving like a stalking panther. He stopped in front of her, placing his hands on the arms of her chair, trapping her. Did Gavin make your meals? Declan asked, his voice low and dangerous. No, I did the cooking, Lydia whispered. But he always made me tea, every night. He said it was a special herbal blend to help me sleep because I was so anxious. Clang. Declan punched the solid oak desk beside him. The wood splintered. Lydia flinched, but Declan immediately softened his expression as he looked at her. He poisoned you, Declan growled. For 2 years, Lydia. That man fed you poison every single night to keep you weak, to keep your wolf silent. You aren't a wolfless omega. You were chemically castrated by the person supposed to protect you. Tears blurred Lydia's vision. The exhaustion, the inability to shift, the constant brain fog. She thought she was broken. She thought she was unworthy. Why? She sobbed, the betrayal cutting deeper than the rejection. Why would he do that? Because he was afraid, Dr. Aris said quietly. Your blood markers show high levels of alpha lineage, Lydia. Your parents. They weren't low-level wolves, were they? They were warriors, Lydia sniffled, before they died. Gavin knew that if you ever shifted, you would be stronger than him, Declan said, his voice dripping with venom. He wanted a slave, not a mate, so he broke you before you could bloom. Lydia covered her face with her hands. The cruelty was unimaginable. She had loved him. She had served him. And every cup of tea was a dose of hatred. She felt Declan's strong hands grip her wrists, pulling them away from her face. He knelt before her, staining the knees of his expensive suit pants on the rug. Look at me, he commanded. She looked into his storm-grey eyes. That is over, Declan vowed. Dr. Oris has already started you on the antidote. Your wolf will wake up. Your strength will return. And when it does, you are going to burn his world to the ground. I can't, Lydia whispered. He's an alpha. He has a pack. Declan smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a monster who had found his favorite prey. And you have a king. He kissed her knuckles, a gesture of reverence that made her heart stop. Rest up, little wolf. In 2 weeks, the Northern Alliance holds the Winter Solstice Ball. Every alpha in the country will be there, including Gavin. Lydia's breath hitched. You want me to go? I don't just want you to go, Declan said, standing up and pulling her into his chest. I want you to walk in there, on my arm, wearing the crown jewels, and watch him realize exactly what he threw away. The Grand Hall of the Northern Alliance was a spectacle of gold leaf, crystal chandeliers, and the scent of expensive perfume masking the pheromones of 500 competitive wolves. At the entrance, Gavin stood in a tuxedo that was slightly too tight around the shoulders. Beside him, Chloe, his new mate, was preening. She wore a bright pink dress that was flashy but lacked elegance, and she was currently complaining about the champagne. I don't see why we had to come, Chloe whined, sipping her drink. This place is so stuffy, and King Declan scares me. Shut up, Chloe, Gavin hissed, scanning the room. We're here to make connections. The pack is in debt. If I can secure a trade deal with the Western packs, we're saved. Besides, being seen here elevates our status. We are a power couple now. Gavin adjusted his tie, trying to look confident, but deep down, he was sweating. The loan sharks he had borrowed from to renovate his house and to buy Chloe's engagement ring were getting impatient. He needed money, and he needed it fast. I heard the king has a new mistress, a nearby alpha whispered to his wife. I heard she's a recluse, the wife replied. Probably some foreign princess, Gavin scoffed. The king is too cold for a mistress. He probably just keeps a few omegas around for entertainment. Suddenly the music stopped. The heavy double doors at the top of the grand staircase groaned open. The room went silent. The herald stepped forward, banging his staff on the marble floor. Presenting His Majesty, King Declan Moore. The herald boomed. Gavin watched with jealousy as Declan stepped onto the landing. The king looked terrifyingly regal in a black velvet tuxedo, his presence commanding the submission of every wolf in the room. But then, the herald spoke again. And his guest, Lady Lydia. Gavin froze. He blinked, sure he had misheard. Then, she stepped out. The collective gasp of the room sucked the air out of the hall. It was Lydia. But it wasn't the Lydia Gavin knew. It wasn't the girl in the oversized sweaters with the dark circles under her eyes. This woman was a goddess. She wore a gown of midnight blue silk that clung to every curve of her body, shimmering like the night sky. The back was open, revealing skin that glowed with health and vitality. Her hair, once dull and brittle, cascaded down her back in glossy chestnut waves. But it was her face that stopped Gavin's heart. Her makeup was flawless, highlighting eyes that were no longer timid, but fierce. Around her neck sat the Star of the North, a diamond necklace worth more than Gavin's entire territory. She didn't look down. She didn't stumble. She placed her hand on Declan's arm, and he looked at her not with contempt, but with an adoration so naked, so intense, that it made the other alphas look away in embarrassment. That's Lydia, Chloe gasped, her jaw dropping. The maid? Impossible, Gavin muttered, his face draining of color. She's an omega, she's trash. But the scent hitting him said otherwise. Even from across the room, the wind carried her scent. It was no longer faint. It was rich, vanilla, rain, and power. Declan led her down the stairs. Every step was a drumbeat in Gavin's chest. As they reached the floor, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Alphas bowed. Lunas curtsied. Gavin couldn't move. He was paralyzed by a mixture of shock and a sudden, violent surge of possessiveness. She was mine, his wolf snarled. She belongs to us. He didn't think. He acted on instinct. As Declan and Lydia moved toward the center of the floor for the opening dance, Gavin shoved his way through the crowd. "Lydia!" he barked. The room went deathly quiet. Lydia stopped. She turned slowly, her movement fluid and graceful. When her eyes landed on Gavin, there was no love, no fear, just cold indifference. Declan stopped beside her. He didn't turn to face Gavin immediately. He simply adjusted his cufflink, the silence stretching until it was unbearable. "Gavin," Lydia said, her voice clear and melodic, carrying through the silent hall. "You look tired." "What are you doing here?" Gavin demanded, ignoring the hundreds of eyes watching him. He pointed a shaking finger at her. "You are a Crescent Creek Omega. You don't belong here. Take off that necklace. You're making a fool of yourself." Chloe rushed up behind him, grabbing his arm. "Gavin, stop! That's the king!" "She's my mate," Gavin shouted, losing control. "I rejected her, but the paperwork hasn't cleared the council yet. Technically, she is still property of my pack." The air temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. Declan finally turned. He didn't shout. He didn't roar. He simply looked at Gavin with the expression of a man looking at a cockroach he was about to crush. "Property," Declan repeated softly. The king took one step forward. The aura he released was so heavy that the glass in the windows rattled. Gavin's knees buckled under the pressure, his wolf whining in terror. "You poisoned her. Declan said. His voice wasn't loud, but it echoed in every corner of the room. Gaps rippled through the crowd. You fed her wolfsbane for 2 years to suppress her light so you could feel big, Declan continued, stalking closer. And then you threw her out in a storm to die. Gavin was trembling now, sweat pouring down his face. That's a lie. She's weak. She's nothing. Declan laughed, a dark, terrifying sound. He reached out and pulled Lydia against his side, his arm wrapping around her waist possessively. She is the future queen of the Northern Alliance, Declan announced, his voice ringing with absolute authority. And you, Gavin, you are trespassing. Declan, please, Lydia said softly, placing a hand on the king's chest. Everyone thought she was pleading for mercy for her former mate. Gavin looked up, a spark of hope in his eyes. She still loves me, he thought. She'll save me. Lydia looked down at Gavin, her eyes hardening into diamonds. Don't kill him yet, she said calmly. He owes me 2 years of back pay for the housekeeping, and I want to watch him work for it. Declan grinned, looking down at her with ferocious pride. As you wish, my love. He snapped his fingers. 4 royal guards materialized from the shadows, grabbing Gavin by the arms. Throw him in the dungeon for tonight, Declan ordered casually. We can discuss his debt in the morning, and remove the woman in the pink dress. Her perfume is giving me a headache. No! Wait, I'm the Alpha! Gavin screamed as he was dragged away, his heels skidding on the marble. Chloe was shrieking as she was escorted out behind him. The doors slammed shut. Declan turned back to Lydia, the violence in his eyes vanishing the moment he looked at her. He bowed low, offering his hand. I believe this is our dance, Lady Lydia. She smiled, taking his hand. As the music swelled and he swept her across the floor, Lydia realized the truth. The girl who cried in the rain was dead, and the woman in the king's arms was just getting started. But as they spun, Lydia noticed a man watching them from the balcony above. A man with a scar running down his cheek and an eye patch. He wasn't bowing. He was smiling a sinister, knowing smile. Declan noticed her stiffen. What is it? Who is that? Lydia whispered, looking up. But when Declan looked, the balcony was empty. Nobody, Declan reassured her, though his eyes narrowed. Just shadows. But Lydia knew it wasn't a shadow, and deep in her gut she knew that Gavin was just a pawn. The real game was about to begin. The days following the winter solstice ball were a golden haze of triumph. The news had spread across the Northern Alliance like wildfire. The Alpha King had chosen a mate, and she was an Omega who had brought the arrogant Gavin kneeling in the dirt. Lydia felt safe for the first time in her life. Declan was not just a protector. He was a constant, warm presence. He moved her into the master suite, claiming he slept better, listening to her heartbeat. Every morning, he would brush her hair, his large, scarred hands, treating her like porcelain. The antidote was working, too. Lydia felt a humming beneath her skin, a vibration of energy that made her senses sharper. She could hear the whisper of the wind through the pines. She could smell the snow before it fell. Her wolf was waking up. But peace, in the world of wolves, is often just the eye of the storm. 3 days after the ball, Declan was called away to the southern border. A dispute over territory lines required the king's direct intervention. I don't want to leave you, Declan murmured, standing by the front door of the estate. The engine of his SUV was idling in the driveway. He cupped Lydia's face, his thumb tracing her lower lip. Something feels wrong. I'll be fine, Lydia promised, adjusting his tie. I'm in the most secure fortress in the country. I have the guards. I have Mrs. Gable. Go, be the king. Declan hesitated, his grey eyes darkening. He leaned down and kissed her, a searing, possessive kiss that left her breathless. "Do not leave the estate grounds, Lydia. Promise me." "I promise," she whispered. He left. And for the first 6 hours, everything was fine. It was late afternoon when the security system glitch occurred. The lights in the estate flickered, and the electronic gates at the end of the long driveway groaned open. Lydia was in the library, reading a book on wolf history, when the heavy oak doors burst open. She expected guards. She expected Mrs. Gable. Instead, Gavin walked in. He looked ragged. His tuxedo from the ball was stained, his eyes bloodshot and wild. Ideally, he should have been in the dungeons, but he held a keycard in his shaking hand, a master keycard. "Gavin?" Lydia stood up, her heart hammering. "How did you get out? How did you get in here?" "I told you, Lydia," Gavin sneered, though his voice wavered with fear. "I needed to clear my debts, and there are people powerful enough to pay them, if I deliver what they want." "What are you talking about?" Lydia backed away until her legs hit the desk. "Me," a smooth, cultured voice answered from the hallway. A man stepped into the room. It was the man from the balcony. He wore a long trench coat and an eye patch over his left eye. His remaining eye was a pale, milky blue. He held a cane topped with a silver wolf's head, but he didn't walk with a limp. He walked with the arrogance of a king. "Victor Draven," Lydia breathed. She recognized the name from the history books she had been reading. He was the exiled duke, the man who had challenged Declan for the throne 5 years ago and lost his eye in the process. "Lady Lydia," Victor purred, bowing mockingly. "You look even more ravishing up close. It's a shame Gavin here wasted you on housework. But then again, betas like him lack vision." "I'm an alpha," Gavin protested, his voice cracking. "You said if I got you the security codes, you'd pay off the loan sharks and give me my territory back." "I said I would pay your debts," Victor corrected. He pulled a silenced pistol from his coat pocket and pointed it at Gavin without looking at him. "Death is a form of debt forgiveness, isn't it?" Phut. The sound was barely louder than a book closing. Gavin's eyes went wide. He looked down at the red bloom spreading on his chest, then collapsed to the floor, dead before he hit the carpet. Lydia screamed, her hands flying to her mouth. Victor stepped over Gavin's body as if it were a piece of trash. He holstered the gun and looked at Lydia with a terrifying hunger. "Now that the help is disposed of," Victor said, "we can discuss your future. You see, my dear, Declan thinks you are just a mate, a romantic weakness. But I know what you really are." Lydia scanned the room for a weapon, a letter opener, a heavy book, anything. "I'm nothing to you." "On the contrary," Victor stepped closer, his scent hitting her, rotten leaves and sulfur. "Your parents were the keepers of the moon shadow bloodline, a recessive gene, very rare. It allows a wolf to channel power not just from themselves, but from the pack around them. It's an amplifier. If I mate with you, and I will force the bond, I won't just challenge Declan, I will crush him." "Declan will kill you," Lydia warned, her voice trembling but defiant. "He will try." Victor smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp, filed into points. "But he will be walking into a trap. And you, my dear, are the bait." He lunged. Lydia grabbed a heavy brass lamp and swung it, but Victor was an alpha of the old blood. He caught her wrist mid-air, squeezing until she cried out. He pulled a syringe from his pocket and jammed it into her neck. "Sleep now, little amplifier," Victor whispered as the world turned grey. "The real game begins when you wake up." Lydia floated in a darkness that smelled of rust and stale water. Pain was the first thing to return, a throbbing ache in her neck where the needle had gone in, followed by the cold, biting sensation of iron against her wrists. She opened her eyes. The world was dim, lit only by the sputtering orange glow of torches bracketed along wet stone walls. She wasn't in a house anymore. The air was heavy and suffocating, carrying the distinct mineral tang of deep earth. An abandoned mine, perhaps? Or a bunker from the old wars. She tried to move, but the rattle of chains stopped her. Her arms were pulled taut above her head, manacled to a heavy iron ring bolted into the rock. Her feet barely touched the damp floor. "Finally," a voice echoed from the shadows. "I was beginning to think I used too much dosage. It would be a shame to damage the merchandise before the transaction is complete." Victor Draven stepped into the light. Without his trench coat, he looked even more menacing. He wore a simple black tactical vest over a white shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms covered in faded, jagged scars, trophies from a lifetime of violence. He was dragging a heavy wooden chair, which he placed directly in front of her. He sat down, crossing his legs casually, and pulled a long, silver dagger from his belt. He began to clean his fingernails with the tip. "Where is he?" Lydia croaked. Her voice was raspy, her throat burning with thirst. "If you hurt him," Victor chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "If I hurt him? My dear Lydia, hurting him is the entire point, but killing him, that requires patience. You see, Declan isn't like normal alphas. He is stubborn. He doesn't know when to die." Victor stood up and walked closer, the tip of the silver dagger hovering inches from Lydia's face. The metal made her skin crawl. An instinctive allergic reaction that all wolves had to silver. "You are the bait in the trap, little wolf," Victor whispered, his single blue eye gleaming with madness. "Do you know why I chose you? It wasn't just your bloodline. It was because Declan has a fatal flaw. He feels too much. He thinks he can save everyone, and that arrogance will be his undoing." "He defeated you once," Lydia spat, adrenaline momentarily overriding her fear. "He took your eye. Next time, he'll take your head." Victor's face twisted. The charming mask slipped, revealing pure, unadulterated hatred. He grabbed Lydia's jaw, squeezing hard enough to bruise. "He took my eye because he cheated," Victor roared, his spit flying onto her face. "He rallied the council against me. He claimed I was too violent to rule, and now he plays house with a broken Omega while the packs grow soft." He released her violently, causing her to swing in her chains. "But tonight, the history books get rewritten. Once I kill him, I will force the mating bond with you. Your moon shadow blood will amplify my strength tenfold. I will be unstoppable." Boom! The sound came from above, a deep, reverberating thud that shook dust loose from the ceiling. Victor looked up, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Ah, right on time." Boom. Crash. The sounds of violence grew louder. Gunshots. The wet tear of flesh. The roar of a beast that sounded more like a thunderstorm than an animal. Lydia's heart hammered against her ribs. He came. After everything, the rejection, the poisoning, the kidnapping, Declan had come for her. The heavy steel door at the far end of the chamber groaned. The metal warped inward, the shape of a fist appearing in the center. With a final, deafening screech of tearing metal, the hinges snapped. The door flew across the room, embedding itself into the stone wall just feet from where Victor stood. Silence fell over the chamber. In the doorway stood the Alpha King. Declan looked like he had walked through hell. His bespoke suit was in tatters. Blood soaked his white shirt, some of it bright red and fresh, some of it darker. His knuckles were raw, but it was his eyes that terrified Lydia. They were glowing a solid, luminous white, devoid of humanity. The wolf was at the surface, barely contained. "Victor," Declan said. His voice was a low rumble, vibrating through the floorboards. It wasn't a shout, it was a death sentence. "Declan," Victor replied smoothly, not even flinching. He stepped behind Lydia, placing the silver blade against her throat. "You look terrible. Being king must be stressful." Declan took a step forward. The air pressure in the room seemed to drop. "Let her go. Your fight is with me." "One more step," Victor warned, pressing the blade harder. A thin line of red blood trickled down Lydia's neck. "One more step, and I open her throat. You know I'm fast enough." Declan froze. The glowing white in his eyes flickered, revealing the panicked grey underneath. He looked at Lydia, his gaze sweeping over her chained wrists, the bruise on her jaw, the blood on her neck. "I'm okay," Lydia whispered, though tears were streaming down her face. "Declan, don't, it's a trap." "Smart girl," Victor sneered. "Drop your weapons, Declan, and suppress your aura. Now." Declan didn't hesitate. He dropped a heavy handgun he had seemingly taken from a guard. He unclenched his fists, forcing his shoulders to slump. He surrendered his power, making himself vulnerable. "Let her down!" Declan begged, his voice cracking. "Please! I will do whatever you want. Just let her down." "I don't think so," Victor said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, remote-like device. "You see, fighting you is tiresome. You're young, you're strong, and you have that annoying king's luck. I prefer certainty." Victor pressed the button. A high-pitched hiss filled the room. From vents concealed in the rocky ceiling, a thick purple fog began to descend. It was heavy, sinking rapidly toward the floor. Lydia smelled it instantly, acrid, sweet, and burning. "Concentrated wolfsbane," Declan coughed, covering his mouth with his arm. "Gas!" "Mixed with silver nitrate partulates," Victor added cheerfully. "Breathe it in, Your Majesty. It will burn your lungs from the inside out. It will paralyze your nerves. And then it will stop your heart." Declan stumbled. He fell to one knee, retching. The gas was descending fast, filling the lower half of the room. Victor, standing on a raised platform behind Lydia, was temporarily above the cloud. Lydia, hanging from the ceiling, was also clear for the moment. But Declan was right in it. "Declan!" Lydia screamed, pulling frantically at her chains. The iron bit into her skin, tearing her wrists. But she didn't care. Declan looked up at her. His skin was already turning a sickly shade of grey. Veins were bulging in his neck as his body tried to fight the toxin. He tried to stand, to rush Victor. But his legs gave out. He collapsed onto his side, convulsing. "Watch him die, Lydia!" Victor shouted over the hissing gas. "Look at your savior! He is weak! He is nothing compared to me!" Lydia watched the light fading from Declan's eyes. She saw his hand reach out toward her, trembling, before falling limp against the cold stone. He was dying. He was dying because she was weak, because she was just a damsel in distress who needed saving. No, the word didn't come from her brain. It came from her marrow. No, it wasn't a thought. It was a command. A command from a lineage that had been asleep for generations. A power that Gavin had tried to poison, that the world had tried to forget. Something inside Lydia broke. It was the lock that had held her wolf captive for 22 years. The pain was instantaneous and blinding. It felt like being struck by lightning. Lydia threw her head back and screamed, but the scream shifted, deepening, distorting into a feral, resonant howl that shook the stalactites from the ceiling. Crack! Her bones rearranged themselves with terrifying speed. The iron cuffs that held her wrists didn't just unlock, they shattered. The metal exploded outward as her forearms expanded, covered in thick, lustrous fur. She dropped to the floor, landing on all fours. But she didn't land as a girl. A blinding flash of golden light illuminated the dark cavern, brighter than the sun. Victor threw his hands up to shield his eyes, yelling in confusion. When the light faded, the girl was gone. Standing in the swirling purple mist was a wolf. But not just any wolf. She was massive, her shoulder height rivaling Declan's. Her fur was not the brown or grey of common wolves. It was pure, unblemished white, glowing with a faint, ethereal luminescence. The white wolf, the spirit walker, the wolfsbane gas swirled around her, but it didn't burn her. Her fur seemed to repel it, the toxin sizzling and vanishing upon contact with her aura. She looked up at Victor. Her eyes were pools of molten gold, ancient and terrifying. "Impossible," Victor whispered, backing away until his back hit the cold stone wall. He dropped the knife, his hands shaking uncontrollably. "The legends! They were just stories. You can't exist." Lydia didn't growl. She didn't bark. She simply moved. She was a blur of white light. She cleared the distance between the floor and the raised platform in a single, fluid leap. Victor tried to reach for the gun in his tactical vest, but he was moving in slow motion compared to her. Lydia slammed into him with the force of a freight train. Her massive paws pinned him to the ground, her claws punching through his vest and into his flesh. Victor screamed, thrashing beneath her. "Get off me! I am an alpha! I command you!" Lydia bared her teeth. "You command nothing," her voice echoed in his mind, a telepathic projection of pure dominance. She didn't drag it out. She didn't torture him. She wasn't like him. She was a queen protecting her king. With a swift, powerful snap of her jaws, she ended the reign of Victor Draven. Silence returned to the cavern, save for the hissing of the gas vents. Lydia turned immediately. Declan. She leapt down from the platform, landing beside his still body. The purple fog was thick here, deadly to any normal wolf, but Lydia was an amplifier. She was a cleanser. She nudged Declan's face with her nose. He wasn't breathing. His heart was a faint, fluttering bird in his chest. Lydia lay down over him. She covered his body with her massive frame, creating a cocoon of white fur. She closed her eyes and focused on the bond, the thin, fraying silver cord that connected their souls. "Come back," she commanded into the void. "I am here. I am strong. Take my strength." She pushed her energy into him. It felt like pouring water from a pitcher. She gave him everything, her warmth, her vitality, the ancient magic of the moon shadow. Minutes passed. The gas vents finally ran empty and hissed into silence. Underneath her, she felt a shift, a deep, ragged intake of breath. Lydia pulled back slightly. Declan's eyes fluttered open. The white was gone. They were his beautiful, stormy grey again. He blinked, coughing weakly, staring up at the magnificent creature hovering over him. He reached up a trembling hand and buried his fingers in her thick white ruff. "Lydia," he rasped, his voice full of wonder. She chuffed softly, licking the blood from his cheek. Then the golden light returned, softer this time. Her form shrank, the fur receding, until she was a girl again, naked, shivering, but alive. She collapsed onto his chest, burying her face in his ruined shirt. "I got you," she sobbed, holding on to him as if he were the only solid thing in the universe. "I got you." Declan wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight, pressing his face into her hair. He was weak, he was poisoned, but he was alive. And he was holding a miracle. "I know," he whispered into the darkness. "My queen, my white wolf." The winter snow had melted, giving way to a spring that was vibrant and full of life. The royal estate, once a fortress of solitude for a lonely king, was now filled with light. Lydia stood on the balcony of the master suite, looking out over the sprawling pine forests of the Northern Alliance. She wore a loose-fitting dress of pale blue silk, the morning breeze playing with the hem. It had taken months for Declan to recover fully from the wolfsbane poisoning. There were nights when he would wake up shouting, reaching for her, terrified she was back in that dungeon. But those nights were becoming fewer. She heard the heavy door click open behind her. Strong arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against a solid, warm chest. "You're up early," Declan murmured, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He smelled of cedar and coffee. "I couldn't sleep," Lydia admitted, leaning back into him. She placed her hands over his, which were resting protectively on her stomach. "He's been kicking all morning. I think he's practicing karate." Declan laughed, a low rumble that she felt against her spine. He moved one hand to rest directly on the distinct, round bump of her pregnancy. "He's an alpha," Declan said with pride. "He's eager to meet the world." "He better be eager to sleep," Lydia teased, "or I'm handing him to you for the night shift." "Deal." Declan turned her around so he could look at her. The scar on his eyebrow seemed less harsh now, softened by the happiness that lived in his eyes. He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "The council is arriving at noon," he said softly. "They want to discuss the new treaty with the southern pacts. They're terrified of you, you know." Lydia smiled. "Good. Maybe they'll actually sign it this time." "They will," Declan promised. "They know that the Northern Alliance is protected by the White Wolf. No one dares challenge us now." Lydia looked past him, into the room where her old life seemed like a distant nightmare. She thought about the girl who sat on the bus stop bench, freezing, holding a suitcase with a broken wheel. She thought about Gavin, and how his cruelty had inadvertently led her to her destiny. "Declan?" "Yes, love." "Do you remember what you said to me? That first night in the car?" Declan's eyes softened. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "I told you that you weren't nobody," he whispered. "And you said I was yours," Lydia reminded him. "I was wrong," Declan said, pulling back slightly to look into her gold-flecked eyes. "I'm not the one who owns this bond, Lydia. You saved me. You woke up the part of me that was dead. You aren't just mine." He kissed her, a slow, deep kiss that tasted of forever. "I am yours," he vowed. "Body, blood, and soul, until the last star burns out." Lydia smiled against his lips. The rain had stopped a long time ago. Now there was only the sun. And so, under the warm spring sun, Lydia and Declan found the peace they fought so hard for. From a rejected outcast shivering in the rain to the legendary White Queen, Lydia's journey proves that sometimes your greatest power is hidden in your deepest pain. Gavin and Victor learned the hard way that you never, ever corner a wolf, especially one with everything to lose. I hope you enjoyed this dramatic werewolf romance saga. If Lydia's transformation into the White Wolf gave you chills, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And I have a question for you. If you were Lydia, would you have forgiven the pack members who ignored you, or would you have exiled them all? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you're the first to hear our next story. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep dreaming.